never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, but here I am, heart racing, palms sweaty, and my mind spinning with thoughts I shouldn't be having. It all started a few weeks ago, in the heat of the kitchen at Le Petit Chateau, one of the city's most prestigious restaurants. My name's Clara, and I'm the sous chef here. I've been working under Chef Aiden for almost a year now. He's brilliant, demanding, and, if I'm being honest, impossibly attractive. But he's my boss, and that's where the trouble begins. That night, the kitchen was a storm of chaos, the kind only a Friday dinner service can bring. Pots clanged, flames roared up from the grill, and Aiden's sharp commands cut through the noise like a knife. I was focused, or at least trying to be, plating a delicate seafood dish. Scallops with a saffron reduction, each one seared just right. That's when I felt it. His eyes. On me. Not the quick glance of a chef checking my work, but something heavier, something that lingered. My skin prickled, a flush creeping up my neck. I told myself it was the heat of the stove, but I knew better. I risked a look up, our eyes locked. For a split second, the world stopped. The sizzle of the pans, the shouts of the line cooks, all of it faded. It was just us, caught in this silent, electric moment. His gaze was intense, dark, searching. Then he broke it, turning to snap at someone about an overcooked steak. But that look stayed with me, burned into my mind like a brand. What was that? I shook it off, or tried to, and went back to my station, hands trembling just enough to annoy me. I'm not new to this game. I'm in my late 20s, good at what I do, and I've worked hard to earn my spot here. The kitchen's my world. Fast, brutal, beautiful. I thrive in the pressure, the rush of getting every dish perfect. Aiden's the one who keeps it all. Together, though. He's in his mid-30s, I'd guess, with this commanding presence that fills the room. Tall, broad-shouldered, always in that crisp white chef's coat. His standards are sky-high, and he doesn't hesitate to let you know when you've screwed up. But he's fair, too. I respect him. Maybe more than I should. The rest of the night, blurred by in a haze of orders and adrenaline. I kept my head down, but every so often I'd catch him watching me again. Not obvious, not like he wanted me to notice, just these fleeting moments that made my pulse jump. Was I imagining it? Aiden's the poster boy for professionalism. No flirting, no favoritism, nothing to suggest he'd ever cross that line. And yet, there was something in the air that night, something I couldn't name. Service finally wound down around midnight. The last plates went out, and the kitchen exhaled, quieter, but still humming with the aftermath. Most of the staff trickled out, muttering goodnights, leaving their stations half cleaned. Not me. I stay late, always have. There's something satisfying about putting everything back in order, wiping down the counters until they gleam. It's my ritual, my way of closing the day. I was alone, or so I thought, scrubbing at a stubborn spot on the steel when I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate. I turned, and there he was, Aiden. His coat was unbuttoned now, hanging open to show the black shirt underneath, clinging just enough to hint at the muscle beneath. My mouth went dry. "Clara," he said, his voice low, smoother than it ever was during service. "You're always the last one here." I swallowed, forcing a casual tone. "Yeah. Well, I like to make sure everything's right for tomorrow. You know how it is." He nodded, stepping closer. The air felt thicker, charged. "I do. It's one of the things I admire about you." Admire. The word hit me harder than it should have. My cheeks burned, and I prayed the dim light hit it. "Thanks, Chef. That means a lot." He didn't stop moving, closing the distance until he was just a foot away. Too close. I could smell him. Clean sweat. A hint of spice from whatever he'd been cooking. "You've got real talent, Clara," he said, his eyes holding mine. "I see it. More than you realize, maybe." I couldn't look away. "I don't know what to say to that." "You don't have to say anything." His voice dropped, almost a whisper now, his breath brushing my skin. "Just know I'm watching you, closely." My heart slammed against my ribs. Before I could respond, he turned and walked off, disappearing into the back office like nothing had happened. I stood there, frozen, my rag dripping onto the counter. Watching me? What did that even mean? Was it about my work or something else? My mind raced, flipping between panic and a thrill I didn't want to admit to. I grabbed my bag, slung it over my shoulder, and headed for the door. The restaurant was silent now, just the hum of the fridges and the faint clink of glassware settling. I pushed the back exit open, stepping into the cool night air, and stopped. There, by the corner of the building, half hidden in the shadows, was Aiden. Leaning against the wall, arms crossed, his eyes fixed on me. A shiver ran down my spine, cold and hot all at once. Something was happening here, something dangerous. And I wasn't sure I could stop it. The next day would change everything. I just didn't know it yet. The next few days at Le Petit Chateau were a whirlwind of chaos and unspoken tension. After that night, when Aiden's words and piercing gaze had left me reeling, I couldn't escape the pull between us. Every shift felt like walking a tightrope, balancing my duties with the dangerous thrill of his presence. I tried to focus on my prep, my plating, anything to keep my mind off him, but it was useless. He was everywhere, watching, directing, commanding the kitchen with that effortless authority that made my heart race. Then came the bombshell. Before service one evening, Aiden gathered us for a staff meeting. His voice cut through the chatter like a knife. "We've been chosen to cater a private event for the city's top brass. It's a big deal for the restaurant, and for your careers. I'll need a tight team to pull it off. Clara, you're in." My stomach flipped. Me? I scanned the room, catching a few jealous glances from the other chefs. Aiden's eyes flicked to mine, holding them for a heartbeat before moving on. "We'll be working late for the next week. If you're not up for it, say so now." No one dared back out. This was a golden ticket, a chance to shine. But as the meeting dissolved, a nagging thought crept in. Why me? Was it my skill or something more? That night, after the others clocked out, it was just Aiden and me in the kitchen. The air hummed with the fridge's low buzz and the faint aroma of thyme and garlic. We were prepping for the event, testing recipes, perfecting every detail. The rest of the team would join later, but for now, it was our little world. "Clara," Aiden said, shattering the quiet. He stood at the counter, sleeves rolled up, his forearms taut as he sliced vegetables with surgical precision. "You've been quiet. Everything okay?" I flashed a tight smile, keeping my tone even. "Yeah, just locked in. This event's huge." He nodded, but his gaze lingered, piercing through my defenses. "It is. But you've got this. I wouldn't have picked you if I didn't believe that." His words hit me like a shot of adrenaline. I turned back to my station, chopping parsley with too much force. "Thanks, chef. I appreciate it." A low chuckle escaped him, vibrating through me. "You've earned it, but don't get cocky. I'll still push you harder than the rest." I looked up, catching the glint in his eye. Half challenge, half tease. "Wouldn't expect less," I replied, my voice sharper than I'd meant. His smirk widened, and for a split second, the air sparked between us. Then he turned away, and I exhaled, shaken by how easily he unraveled me. Over the next few nights, it became a ritual. Late hours, just the two of us. The kitchen a pressure cooker of heat and unspoken desire. The flirting started small, a sly comment about my knife skills, a brush of his hand as he handed me a spatula. But it grew, each moment bolder, riskier. Every touch, every glance was a dare. How far can we take this? One night, as we wiped down the counters, our hands reached for the same towel. Our fingers brushed, and neither of us moved. My breath hitched as I met his gaze. Dark, intense, searching. "Clara," he began, his voice rough, unguarded. "Yes, chef," I managed, my pulse hammering. He faltered, jaw clenching, then pulled back, letting the towel drop. Nothing. Solid work tonight. Disappointment crashed over me as I nodded and finished up. What had he wanted to say? Why did he stop? The questions gnawed at me all the way home. Then there was Zoe. She was the new pastry chef, young, talented, and dripping with confidence. She'd started a few days ago, and I hated how quickly she'd caught Aiden's eye. I'd see them chatting, her laughter bright and easy, his smile warmer than it should have been. It twisted something inside me, something I didn't want. To name, jealousy. I had no claim on him. He was my boss, end of story. But watching Zoe lean in, whispering something that made him grin, I felt my grip tighten on my knife. Worse, Aiden noticed. He'd catch my eye across the kitchen, a knowing look that made my cheeks burn. One night, as I cleaned my station, Zoe sidled up. "Hey, Clara," she purred, her tone syrupy. "You and Aiden seem tight. All those late nights together." I stiffened, forcing calm. "It's for the event. He needs the best." She smirked, propping herself against the counter. "Sure, but I've seen how he looks at you. It's not just work, is it?" My heart stopped. "What are you implying?" She shrugged, eyes glinting. "Oh, nothing. Everyone's noticed the vibe. Don't worry, my lips are sealed. For now." Panic clawed at me. "There's no vibe. We're professionals." Her laugh grated on me. "If you say so. Just watch yourself, Clara. Kitchens talk." She sauntered off, leaving me reeling. Was it that obvious, or was she baiting me? I needed to confront Aiden, set boundaries, but the thought of facing him made my stomach knot. That night, he called me into his office as I was leaving. I shut the door behind me, nerves buzzing. He sat at his desk, face unreadable. "Clara, we need to talk." "Yeah," I croaked, swallowing hard. "We do." He stood, crossing to me. Too close, as always. "You've seemed off. What's going on?" I took a breath, diving in. "It's us, Aiden. This thing between us. It's real, isn't it?" He went still, eyes boring into mine. Silence stretched, and I braced for denial. Then he reached out, his hand grazing my arm. "No," he murmured, voice raw. "It's not just you." My breath caught, and I stepped closer, drawn in. "But it can't happen. You're my boss." "I know," he said, his hand sliding to my shoulder, igniting my skin. "But I can't get you out of my head. It's torture." I shut my eyes, his confession echoing mine. "Same," I whispered. He leaned in, forehead touching mine. "We have to keep it quiet. No one can know." "Agreed," I breathed, lost in him. A sharp knock jolted us apart. Guilt flooded me as Aiden stepped back, voice steady. "Come in." Zoe poked her head in, eyes darting between us. "Sorry, chef. Quick question about the desserts." "Of course," Aiden said, cool as ever. "Clara, we'll wrap this up later." I nodded, forcing a smile as I slipped out. Zoe's smirk burned into me. She suspected something, maybe knew. Fear coiled in my gut. What was I doing? And how long could we hide this? One thing was clear. I didn't want to stop. and that scared me most of all. It had been a week since Aiden and I admitted our feelings, and every day felt like a tightrope walk. In the kitchen, we were professionals, focused, efficient, a well-oiled machine. But beneath the surface, the air crackled with unspoken desire, a brush of his hand as he passed me a platter, a lingering glance across the stove. These tiny moments were our secret language, thrilling and terrifying all at once. Tonight, the restaurant was buzzing with energy. We were gearing up for a high-profile wedding reception, and the pressure was on. Aiden was in his element, barking orders with that commanding presence that made my knees weak. I tried to focus on my tasks, but my mind kept drifting to him. Clara, the amuse-bouche, where are we? On that? Aiden's voice snapped me back to reality. Almost ready, chef, I replied, plating the miniature tartlets with precision. He nodded, his eyes flicking to mine for a beat longer than necessary. Good. Keep it tight. As he turned away, I caught Zoe watching us from her station. Her lips curled into a knowing smile and my stomach twisted. She'd been hovering lately, her gaze sharp and calculating. Did she suspect something? I pushed the thought aside and focused on the task at hand. But later, as I was restocking the pantry, Zoe cornered me. You and Aiden seem awfully close, she said, her tone casual but her eyes gleaming with mischief. I forced a laugh. We're just colleagues, Zoe. You know how it is in this industry. She tilted her head, unconvinced. Sure, but I've seen the way he looks at you, and the way you look at him. My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral. You're imagining things. We're professionals. Zoe shrugged, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. If you say so, just be careful, Clara. People talk. She sauntered off, leaving me with a sinking feeling. Was it that obvious? Or was she just fishing for information? That night, after service, Aiden asked me to stay late to go over the final menu for the wedding. The kitchen was quiet, the staff gone, and the only light came from the soft glow of the overhead lamps. We sat at the small desk in his office, our knees almost touching. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Clara, he murmured, his voice low and husky. I can't stop thinking about you. I looked up, meeting his intense gaze. Me neither, I admitted, my breath catching. He reached out, his fingers tracing the line of my jaw. This is dangerous, but I don't care. Before I could respond, he leaned in and captured my lips in a searing kiss. Time stopped as we melted into each other, all the pent-up desire pouring out. But then, a noise, a clatter from the kitchen, jerked us apart. We froze, listening. Probably just the ice machine, Aiden whispered, but his eyes were wary. I nodded, trying to steady my breathing. We should be more careful. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know, but it's hard when I want you so much. I smiled, touching his cheek. We'll find a way. But as I left the restaurant that night, Zoe's words echoed in my mind. People talk. And in a place like this, secrets didn't stay hidden for long. The following day, preparations for the wedding were in full swing. The kitchen was a hive of activity, with everyone working at breakneck speed. Aiden was everywhere, directing, tasting, adjusting. I admired his focus, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Zoe was watching us. During a brief lull, I slipped into the walk-in fridge to grab some ingredients. As I was rummaging through the shelves, the door creaked open, and Zoe stepped in. Clara, she said, her voice icy, we need to talk. I straightened, my heart pounding. What's up? She closed the door behind her, trapping us in the cold, confined space. I know about you and Aiden." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb," she snapped. "I saw you two last night in his office, kissing." I felt the color drain from my face. "Zoe, it's not what you think. Save it." She cut me off. "I don't care what it is, but I want something in return for my silence." "What do you mean?" I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. Zoe's eyes glittered with malice. "I want you to step down from the wedding event. Tell Aiden you can't handle it, and recommend me instead." I stared at her, incredulous. "You're blackmailing me?" "Call it what you want," she said with a shrug. "But if you don't, I'll make sure everyone knows about your little affair, including the owners." My mind raced. The owners had a strict policy against workplace relationships, especially between supervisors and subordinates. If they found out, Aiden could lose his job, and my career would be tarnished. But giving in to Zoe's demands meant sacrificing my hard work and letting her win. "I need time to think," I stammered. "You have until tomorrow," Zoe said, turning to leave. "Don't make the wrong choice, Clara." She exited the fridge, leaving me shivering, not just from the cold. I didn't know what to do. Telling Aiden about Zoe's threat might make things worse, but I couldn't handle this alone. That evening, as the staff prepared for the wedding, I pulled Aiden aside. "We need to talk," I whispered. He nodded, leading me to a quiet corner. "What's wrong?" I took a deep breath. "Zoe knows about us. She saw us kissing and is threatening to tell everyone unless I step down from the event." Aiden's face darkened. "That little shh," I cautioned, glancing around. "What do we do?" He thought for a moment, then said, "We can't let her control us, but we also can't risk exposure." "So, what's the plan?" I asked, feeling helpless. "I'll talk to her," he decided. "Maybe I can reason with her." I wasn't sure that would work, but I trusted him. "Okay, but be careful." He squeezed my hand. "I will. Now let's focus on the event. We can't let this distract us." I nodded, trying to push aside my anxiety. But as the guests began to arrive and the kitchen sprang into action, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to unravel. As the wedding reception kicked off, the atmosphere in the kitchen was electric. Waiters rushed in and out, carrying trays of hors d'oeuvres and champagne. The scent of roasted lamb and garlic wafted through the air, mingling with the sound of clinking glasses and laughter from the dining room. I tried to lose myself in the rhythm of cooking, but my mind kept drifting back to Zoe's ultimatum. Every time I saw her, my stomach clenched. She was working the dessert station, her movements precise and confident, but her eyes kept flicking towards me, a smug smile playing on her lips. Aiden was a whirlwind, directing the team with his usual authority. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened when he thought no one was looking. He was worried too. During a brief moment when we were both at the pass, he leaned in close. "I'll handle Zoe after service," he murmured. "Don't worry." I nodded, but worry was all I could feel. What if she decided to spill the beans before then? What if she told someone right now, in the middle of the event? As if on cue, Zoe approached. Us, a tray of petite fours in her hands. "Everything okay over here?" she asked, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "Fine," Aiden replied curtly. "Focus on your station." She raised an eyebrow but didn't push further, sauntering back to her spot. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady my nerves. Just a few more hours and this would all be over, one way or another. But as the night wore on, the pressure mounted. A waiter dropped a tray, sending shrimp cocktails flying. A guest complained about an undercooked steak, and Aiden had to comp their meal. And through it all, Zoe's presence loomed like a dark cloud. Finally, as the last desserts were being plated, I thought we might make it through without incident. But then, Zoe caught my eye and mouthed, "Time's up." My heart stopped. What did she mean? Was she going to expose us now? I looked around frantically for Aiden, but he was in the dining room, talking to the bride and groom. Zoe started walking towards the kitchen door, and I knew I had to stop her. "Wait," I called, hurrying after her. She turned, a triumphant smile on her face. Decided to cooperate? I glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "Zoe, please, this isn't fair." "Life's not fair," she said with a shrug. "But I'm willing to make a deal." "What do you want?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "Simple," she replied. "You break up with Aiden, publicly, tonight. Make it clear that it's over. Then I'll keep your secret." I stared at her, horrified. "You can't be serious." "Dead serious," she said, her eyes cold. "Do it, or I'll tell everyone right now." I felt like the walls were closing in. How could I choose between my relationship and my career, between Aiden and my future? But before I could respond, Aiden appeared, his face a mask of concern. "What's going on here?" Zoe's smile widened. "Oh, just having a little chat with Clara. She has something to tell you." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I was trapped, and I didn't know how to escape. I stood there, frozen, Zoe's words hanging in the air like a guillotine. Aiden's eyes darted between us, confusion and concern etched on his face. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. This was it, the moment everything could fall apart. "Clara?" Aiden's voice was steady, but I could hear the edge of worry beneath it. "What's going on?" Zoe's smirk widened, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "Go on, Clara. Tell him." I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come. How could I choose between my career and the man I'd fallen for? Zoe had cornered me with her ultimatum: break up with Aiden publicly, or she'd expose our relationship to the entire staff. The clatter of pots and pans faded into a distant hum as my mind raced. But as I looked at Aiden, his gaze soft yet intense, something inside me shifted. I couldn't let Zoe win. I couldn't let her manipulate us like this. Taking a deep breath, I squared my shoulders. "Aiden, Zoe knows about us. She's threatening to tell everyone unless I break up with you, right now, in front of everyone." His jaw clenched, and for a split second I saw fury flash in his eyes. But then he turned to Zoe, his voice dangerously calm. "Is that true?" Zoe shrugged, unfazed. "It's for the best, Chef. You know the rules. No fraternizing with the staff, especially not your sous chef." Aiden stepped closer to her, his presence towering. "And you think blackmail is the way to handle this?" "I think it's the only way," Zoe shot back, her confidence unwavering. "Unless you want the owners to find out. They'd fire you both in a heartbeat." The kitchen had gone eerily quiet. I could feel the eyes of the staff on us, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. My hands trembled, but I forced myself to stay composed. Aiden glanced at me, and in that moment, I saw his resolve harden. Clara and I were together, and I'm not ashamed of it. A collective gasp rippled through the kitchen. Zoe's smirk faltered, her plan unraveling. "You're admitting it? Just like that?" "Yes," Aiden said, his voice firm. "Because I'd rather face the consequences than let you hold this over us." I felt a surge of pride and fear. He was risking everything for me, for us. Zoe's eyes narrowed, her composure slipping. "You're making a mistake, Aiden. The owners will..." But before she could finish, a voice cut through the tension. It was Marco, one of the line cooks, stepping forward with a nervous glance. Actually, Zoe, you're not exactly innocent yourself. All heads turned to him. Zoe's face paled. What are you talking about? Marco hesitated, then spoke up. I've seen you sneaking supplies out the back. Herbs, spices, even some of the expensive cuts. You've been stealing from the restaurant for weeks. A stunned silence fell over the kitchen. Zoe's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She looked like a trapped animal, her bravado crumbling. Is this true? Aiden demanded, his voice like steel. Zoe's gaze darted around, searching for an escape, but there was none. I don't know what he's talking about, she stammered, but Marco wasn't done. I have proof. I took pictures, just in case. I didn't want to cause trouble, but, well, this seems like the right time. He pulled out his phone, showing the screen to Aiden. I leaned over, catching glimpses of time-stamped photos. Zoe loading boxes into her car late at night, the restaurant's logo clear on the packaging. Aiden's expression darkened as he scrolled through the images. When he looked up, his eyes were cold. You've been stealing from us, Zoe, and you have the nerve to threaten Clara and me? Zoe took a step back, panic setting in. Wait, Aiden, I can explain. Save it, he snapped. You're fired. Effective immediately. The words hung in the air, final and unyielding. Zoe's face crumpled, a mix of shock and fury. For a moment, I thought she might lash out, but then she turned on her heel and stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the door behind her. A collective exhale filled the room. The staff exchanged glances, unsure of what to do next. Aiden turned, to me, his expression softening. Are you okay? I nodded, still reeling from the whirlwind of emotions. Yeah, I think so. He took my hand, right there in front of everyone, and squeezed it gently. We'll figure this out, together. A few murmurs of surprise rippled through the staff, but no one seemed hostile. In fact, a couple of them smiled, and Marco gave me a thumbs up. Maybe they'd suspected all along. Maybe they didn't care as much as we thought. But there was still the matter of the owners. Aiden and I both knew that. As if on cue, the kitchen door swung open, and Mr. DuPont, one of the restaurant's owners, stepped in. His eyes swept over the scene, taking in the tension that still lingered. What's going on here? He asked, his tone sharp. Aiden stepped forward, still holding my hand. Mr. DuPont, there's something you need to know. He explained everything, our relationship, Zoe's blackmail, her theft. I stood beside him, my heart in my throat, waiting for the axe to fall. When Aiden finished, Mr. DuPont was silent for a long moment,